Okay, I want to turn to Solana economics because we've actually seen some like Solana fees pick up and actually like be pretty sustainable. Uh, where where do you find Solana into? So like in Ethereum, when I got into Ethereum, the monetary policy was we issue 5 Ether per block. And then it got changed to 3, and then it got changed to 2, and then EIP 1559 was introduced, and then proof of stake was introduced, and that's like the last update that there's been. If you had to like map Solana's arc in terms of its like economic sustainability, where are we on that arc, and like what's ahead of us?
I think what's different is that so a bunch of validators compete on commission. So for users at stake, they pick the lowest commission validator and they basically experience no dilution, right? But there is some dilution because a bunch of the tokens are unstaked. So those are the folks that are effectively paying this like kind of transfer of wealth from everyone that's staking to unstaking, and validators take a little cut of that in between. It's hard to tell like how much like users are impacted because the cooldown and warm up period on Solana is really fast. So it's like 2 days, one epoch basically. So even if you're like a big fund and you're trading, you would probably keep 80% of your SOL staked and the whatever you're using for trading unstaked, right? So then you're kind of experiencing minimum dilution, or effectively like it's for whatever reason 69% of the tokens are staked right now. If everyone staked exactly 69% of the tokens, you'd be no dilution because you effectively like it's all moving from one bucket to the same to every person. So like I think that pain is actually like managed by people pretty effectively because the warm up and cool down period is so fast on Solana. So like, but like when I argue with you online, whether that like on Twitter, the posts are like, there's not enough room to like explain the nuance of that.
Yeah.
But like, you're not wrong that inflation is a thing and it is diluting some people. But how much, I think there's a lot of nuance to figure out how much of that is. What I know is that like a clear cost to the network is the hardware. So like every validator, every RPC node, all of those have to be paid with real money, just like you pay for electricity to mine blocks. But like the difference between Bitcoin, the cost of hash power, and the cost to run the Solana computer is like a million X, right? But like, I think for the network to be sustainable, the fees that you get from running it have to cover the total cost of the hardware. And I think like the fees right now are maybe like 50 million a year, and the cost of the hardware, depending on the provider and all that stuff, is like maybe between 10 to 20. So I think the fees have passed the cost of the hardware, so that you can say that it's sustainable.
Global cost of maintaining the Solana network is $10 to $20 million.
It depends how you count it, but like if you took the cheapest possible, like node, 350 a month, and you multiplied it by 3,000 nodes, it actually comes out like to around 10. But like people are not going to take. There's lots of different other infra costs, and people will like pay for the more expensive ones, right? So you kind of like, maybe it's twice as much, but like it's also a bunch of nuance there, right? Like RPC nodes that like Magic Eden uses don't need to be paid for by the network because they have a business that makes money off the state, and they will pay for those machines and count it as an expense. But it is providing some security to the state to have those replicas. So like how you count all this stuff is complicated. How you like attribute the earnings from MEV that Jito has is also complicated, because effectively any value that a block producer gets from the network incentivizes them to acquire more stake. Right. So like that could be like all those incentives combined are like the positive stuff going into the network. All the costs are the negatives. I think right now the positives outweigh the negatives, but again, there's a bunch of nuance there. But I think like ultimately these networks have to capture a lot more value to be competitive to like profit per market cap with a tech company. If we have to actually like compare those two things, unless you believe there's some other reason to value these things higher. I don't. I think ultimately like there's got to be like value created for the world is sometimes risk-free asset price at the treasuries equals like our like total value of the system. I think that fundamental function works for everything.
Mhm.
And like where that value capture occurs in the future, I think, is if the network can handle many different hotspots, like thousands of them concurrently. And then the economic costs of those hotspots go up, and like the kind of fees that you're seeing now on the network, if you go to Solana Compass, you see that like priority fees on the chart are now like the biggest thing. And then base fees you can't even see, and vote fees are like barely like visible. They're still visible, but much, much smaller portion. So like in a world where Solana is sustainable and is like valued and capturing value at a higher rate, is a world where there is lots of hotspots, you know, and the network can handle many concurrent hotspots at the same time, and those economics are captured by the protocol.
Right. And by captured by the protocol, do you mean payment to validators or burn, SOL burn?
This is the big question, is I don't know if that matters. I don't like, I know a lot of folks in Ethereum want to do the burn, and there's good reasons for that. I don't know if it matters over the long term. This is like the big unknown.
Sure.
Like, I don't know if it matters.
I will say that like all of the Ethereum people will like say, hey, do this, do this, do this. And it will be very much in line with like what Ethereum is. Like, why should you do the burn? Well, because Ethereum does the burn, and, you know, we have ultrasound.money and we like to look at that website. But the thing is, like, if you keep on listening to the Ethereum people, they're just going to tell you to become Ethereum at the end of the day. And at some point, like, that's not helpful.
Right. Right. Like, so like the argument that the burn doesn't matter is that like within the black box of the whole network, right, you have the negative externalities you have to pay for to run the computers, all that stuff. And then you have the positive externalities where I like earned my paycheck from driving an Uber, and then I used it to pay for the fees on the network.
Right. Yeah.
And but it doesn't matter if that fee is burnt or is distributed to everyone in the box, or like what happens in the box, how those numbers move around. Do not change the weight of that box. Like it's like it's like accounting in the computer. Who cares if you burn it or not, or like whatever. I don't think it matters, like at the end of the day.
I think it doesn't matter at the end of the day to make the box function, like whether you give it to validators or you burn it, like the box can function in both strategies. But I mean, like what you choose to do does change the output of the system, right? And so like the whole Ethereum perspective is like you burn it because ETH is money, and the Solana perspective is like you want to minimize that because Solana is like an applications platform, and it's all about.
I don't care about the burn of the token. What I care about is that like the fees like don't spike without reason. So like what breaks Solana is that like, because it's not we don't have a layer 2, like layer 2s are not on the roadmap. Like you can build layer 2s in Solana, but the whole point of the single unified state machine is that you don't need them. Right. And if you have like DeFi arbs increase the cost to access the network to have to outbid the cost of the DeFi arbs, it means that payments have to have a separate app chain.
Right.
It means like, and I'm like, okay, well then just make them all Celestia rollups or whatever. I don't care. Like then like it doesn't matter, right? Like I think if you can't solve the economics, the isolation at the economics level, then the premise of Solana doesn't work. But I think you need like some burn to prevent like weird spam attacks where validators like spam themselves and like for free and can like price out users. A bunch of stuff with 1559 is actually really, really clever ways to prevent that. Right. But I don't know if you need the burn for capturing value, like, because the burn is very, very different from Apple getting dollars and hoarding those dollars that they can spend later at any given time to like build more products, right? Like Ethereum doesn't have that like dollar budget. When you burn the ETH, you cannot spend it in the future. It's gone.
Well, that's not how I would describe it. I would say
save the ETH, you can't. It's pointless to save it or burn it. Like if you like convert it to dollars, that would be interesting and different.
The idea of the burn is that you burn the ether and then you give yourself tolerance to issue that ether again later, right? And so in like
at a later date, you're in a totally different environment. And
Right.
if shit hits the fan
Mhm.
and everything is tanking, right, versus the dollar, you're not actually hedged to be able to issue more. You're like in a death spiral, and if you issue more, you die. Like if the question on Ethereum shouldn't be, do we burn the ETH or do we give it to some validator or a public goods thing? It should be, do we convert it to dollars and keep this like other asset that is completely decoupled from Ethereum in case shit hits the fan?
Yeah, but you can't have that because these are like trustless economic systems.
Why
That's
not?
like that's what like the Terra Foundation, the Luna Foundation got. It was like, yeah, we're gonna have like Bitcoin, and whenever we need to defend the peg, we're gonna deploy the Bitcoin.
No, you're not. The goal isn't to defend the peg. The goal is to pay engineers to like make it better later. Well, that's a totally different thing.
You know Kevin Owocki?
Huh?
Do you know Kevin Owocki?
Don't remember him.
He's the founder of Gitcoin in the Ethereum ecosystem, and he made this like EIP proposal. This is like awesome, like really awesome Ethereum lore. He made this like Ethereum EIP proposal to like have 10% of block rewards go to fund like public goods. And like, how could you argue with that? Like we all love public goods in Ethereum, but it actually like created like a pretty big, not like civil war because like one side won very, very quickly, but it was all about like the credible neutrality of like where we send the ether that's captured. And the idea is like, if we send it to Gitcoin, well then, Gitcoin today wants to fund public goods. But what happens when like if Gitcoin just becomes like a vector for control?
Change it.
Yeah, but then you're changing too much, right? Like you can. No,
we have cryptography, which is the tool that the rest of the world, 10 billion people, are going to use to coordinate decisions. Much more difficult than where the burn goes. This is like the magic. You guys
like
are
a shelling
too
fence
pessimistic.
Thing, right? No, it's like this is like the whole like cockroach chain file of Gadriel is the metaphor that Vitalik uses, which is like, you don't mess with that because as soon as like you just solve that by changing it again in the future, all of a sudden you have like a political and governance system.
But the whole point of like cryptography, right? What we're building is fundamentally to connect 10 billion people, right? So they can all coordinate decisions instantly, globally, and like do much more like powerful things than like funding open source software.
Yeah, I think there is value in ungovernance though. So like there is like, we can find systems that are totally resonant with every single human, but like what's that one line? Is like democracy is the worst form of governance except for all the other ones. It's like one of the best forms of governance is like not having any governance. And so like that's the Ethereum perspective is like you don't mess with the block rewards because that becomes a vector for political capture.
I don't disagree, and I would not recommend anyone try this on Solana because I think it's way too complicated too. But like I think it's a missed opportunity, I think.
Okay, I think this is like one of the big dichotomies between like the Ethereum perspective and the Solana perspective, and I would actually like camp Ethereum.
And I don't speak for all of Solana. This is just my opinion too, right?
Of course. I actually think on this part of the spectrum, like Ethereum and Bitcoin are actually closer together than Ethereum is to Solana, where like money is an app, and it's honestly like one of the most important apps. So this is part of like the Bankless thesis that we've been like pounding around for a while, where like we in crypto are here to make new monies. And so like the Solana idea of do you have non-stake?
I would disagree. I think Solana folks very much in the same camp. There was this like, again, people started talking about like forking off the FTX estate, and it was like quickly squashed by everyone. Right. There was like a instant immune response that like property rights are sacred. Whatever happens. Like the state is sacrosanct, and we do whatever we can to preserve it. And that it didn't come from me. It literally came from the ecosystem. So I don't think it would be possible for Solana to do this either. And I feel like it's a missed opportunity for somebody to think bigger and be like, the world is like very complex. What we're building is actually to like empower people to do very, very complex governance stuff. Like, we can do it. It's just going to be hard, and we can figure it out. But like,
so I get that like Solana believes in property rights because that's like a core tenet of crypto. If you don't have property rights in your block space, then what is your blockchain even for? But I don't see the same area of emphasis from the Solana community as being interested in like money and the concept of money and its role in the world.
That I think is like maybe a very nuanced way to look at it, but like I think that the idea of like collecting the fees and then spending them is against, at least to me, rubs against my idea of like property rights. Like it feels like I'm being taxed and then somebody else benefits, right? Like it's like
collecting the fees and then spending them, or
spending them on like arbitrary governance decided things doesn't feel true to like being a fully crazy property rights libertarian, which we all get to.
Wait. So I would agree with that. So like Ethereum, Ether collecting fees and then burning it, and rather than deciding that like this public institution is better than that public institution, feels good in terms of like no one's rights are being violated because everyone's being treated equally.
Correct. And I feel like most of the Solana community would agree with that sentiment. Like we all like to LARP as libertarians, right? Like,
yeah.
But I think like reality is that like there's far more complex things in the world, and like you want to solve them. And like I think cryptography offers like a way to like really transform governance and do all these things that we all dream about in the post crypto world. And like if we are too afraid to do them ourselves, there's no way the world is going to do it. So like at the same time, like while I like agree, hey, text, don't do this, but like I wish somebody would do it.
Do you
Maybe
think
Cosmos people will do it? I don't know.
Are you like advocating this as like a thought experiment, as like this is worth thinking about, or do you actually think like we could make a system of money that has governance as a component of it?
I think if we did, it would be far more powerful than one without it.
That's very Keynesian of you.
Yeah. I think like human intelligence, I'm like very optimistic on human intelligence, human goodness, their ability to like, given enough communication, come to the right decision. I'm very optimistic on that. I think it's a very hard problem to solve, and like I wish somebody was solving it. But
it would be a first, I would say, for humanity to solve that problem.
No, I think we've done it. Like
human governance over money, and governance is like the meta problem of like the human species, right?
Like the world's like US is not too terrible, right? Like most of the places that we choose to live have pretty decent governance. There's definitely places that don't, but like out of a lot of trial and error, people have figured out like most of the best practices.
Okay, so this is what I was going to bring up with the whole like, I think the Ethereum, again, you don't speak for Solana, you are one member of the Solana, perhaps a very important one, but a member nonetheless. This is where like if that is like a perspective to apply to like, and I do see this in like broader Solanas, like they don't emphasize the role and importance of money in the same way that Bitcoin exclusively does, and a large part of Ethereum definitely does. Yep. And because like the last time we had you on Bankless, like we asked you like, is Sol money? And you're like, Sol's not money. And to us, I'm like, that's the thing. We start there and we expand outwards, but without your base chain becoming money, then you can't expand outwards from that.
So that I agree with you. I don't think it matters to Solana devs or community if all the volume that was happening on there was going against the wrapped ETH pair, everyone would be just as happy. Like, holy shit, we got it to work. Everything's like working.
Really?
Yeah.
if ETH was the unit of account in Solana, you think Solana can be like, nice, cool, great.
Yeah, because like the message bus works. It's coordinating state. Everyone is like paying very low cheap fees, and everything's working.
Look, as an ETH maxi, I would love ETH to be the unit of account inside of Solana.
That would be awesome. Whatever. Like, who cares? Like, it's like no different than USDC. It's not like I'm like competing with Jeremy Allaire and like money adoption. I want to help them.
Is that is this a minority or majority opinion? What do you say of the Solana community?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. This is a good question. I think like people become token maxis because a lot of their like faith and like kind of all these things and what this technology can accomplish in the future are all wrapped into this like one thing. And then like it becomes like I think it's harder to build an NFT marketplace for like whatever quacks that would trade against USDC versus one with Sol, because you're trying to attract the super Solana maxis that are all like, you have that like, and this is where I think the money meme starts to roll, is that like once you start building other functions on top and your initial customer base is like all the maxis of that particular like L1, they're all going to use that token. But like, I don't fundamentally believe that there's anything I can do like as an engineer or programmer to make that happen. It's a meme.
Sure.
And like, I think like, I honestly think that if ETH was the biggest trading pair, like the whole idea of like Solana's blockchain and NASDAQ speed, that would be the narrative and meme. Nobody's going to talk about Sol as money, and nobody does, right? I don't think you see that sentiment on crypto Twitter or Sol as money. So like, I don't think much would change in the community if that was the result. Which is cool.
I think if there was more if ETH was like the unit of account inside Solana, and like when I went to like Tensor to go like buy another Mad Lad and it was denominated in ETH, that would be like the greatest Ethereum Solana handshake moment of like all time.
They could literally do that and do the trade exchange through Jupiter for 0 fees. Like, you wouldn't
What's
know
the fastest
what
way to get
happens
ETH on Solana these days? Is it Wormhole?
It's probably Mayan Bridge is like a wrapper on top of Wormhole that has nice UX, or like I think Jupiter probably has a kind of a bridge wrapper too.
Cool. All right. As soon as I see a marketplace with ETH denomination, boy is gonna go shopping.
Okay. Yeah. Somebody should like. Oh man, I'll ask the Tensor guys if they can detect if you have MetaMask installed.
And they can redenominate to ETH?
Yeah, redenominate an ETH. Check how much MetaMask you have, like how much ETH you have, and like past a certain threshold, you redominate.
Right. Yeah, we do have the Tensor guys on in January in 3 weeks, so maybe I'll just ask them then. If you enjoyed all of that, then you'll absolutely love the Bankless newsletter. Join over 300,000 fellow readers, all for free. Click below to sign up.